Hey, I'm Jeff Cook, and this is Backyard Basics. It's August now, and summer's winding down, drawing to a close. It's the dog days of summer, and I've noticed a lot of you folks visiting your local peach packing sheds, and a lot of you get in there and you see these boxes of big, beautiful peaches, and I know what you start thinking about. You start thinking, man, I sure would like to produce my own peaches, grow my own trees, and have my own peaches in my yard. So this month, we're going to take a little time. Hopefully, I can squeeze it into 20 minutes. We're going to take a little bit of time and give you the basics of growing, planting a tree and growing a tree up, so you can go from something like this, a one-year-old tree, and hopefully by the end of this, produce something like this. But really, what I'm gonna call the name of this title of this show is why you shouldn't grow a peach, because it's not an easy job. All right, August, a lot of people maybe don't think about planting trees and maybe putting an orchard in August, but August is really a good time to start thinking about it. And the reason for that is it gives you plenty of time to get an area ready for peaches. Anytime you plant a perennial crop like a peach or pecan or any kind of tree, even ornamental trees, you need to really plan ahead and do a lot of work ahead of time so that down the road, your investment is taken care of. I don't know how many times I've probably told you this in my shows, but I'll tell you again. This would be a great time of year to get a soil sample. We have soil probes that you can borrow at the office. We loan them out. If you're going to plant some trees in an area, you just take your soil probe a few spots, use a plastic bucket to collect it, collect as many samples as you can for the one area, mix it all together, and about 2 handfuls is all we need. But soil sampling is very important. It's going to tell you the nutrient levels in your soil. It's also going to tell you the pH. pH is something that we need to adjust now. We need to be able to put lime out now ahead of time so that we get our pH up to 6, 6.5, well ahead of planting. We don't want to be trying to put lime out on top of a planting. Like in this orchard right here is planted this last winter. To correct the pH here would be a real problem, be hard to do. You have to do some incorporation with a tiller or with a harrow, which would cause a lot of root damage. So you want to go ahead and have it out ahead of time. Another thing that you want to have out ahead of time prior to planting is your phosphorus. Phosphorus, just like lime, is not going to move very far in the soil, so you need to have it incorporated in that root zone so that it's there when the trees need it. They don't need a lot, but if you have to get phosphorus down to the roots after you planted a tree like these trees, if you need to get phosphorus down to them, it's really hard to get phosphorus down in that soil profile. So sample now, sample this, right now, sample up into September. Just sample so that you can get lime out at least say 3 months ahead of planting. And you can do planting all throughout the winter. Do a little early spring planting. But get the soil ready, get the lime out, get the pH up, get your phosphorus out, and then down the road we can work on our nitrogen and potassium. So soil sample first, and then we'll talk a little bit about variety selection in a minute. All right, so now you've got your soil test, you're getting your soil ready, or you've got it ready. The next thing you need to do, and probably the most important thing with producing peaches, is to pick the right varieties. I'm not going to name any names in any stores, but there are some stores out there where you go and buy peach trees, and one, they're overgrown for what you need, and two, they may or may not be what's on the label. So make sure if you're going to buy peach trees, make sure you buy peach trees that are actually bred for our area, and make sure you buy peach trees that you're getting what is on the label. Peaches are not native to Georgia, so we have a lot of problems with diseases and with insects, but the trees that we do grow in Georgia have been bred. The ones that are recommended for Georgia have been bred for Georgia, and they have been bred for some of the diseases that we have here, and also for some of the pests. So we actually have a publication for homeowners. It's called Home Garden Peaches and Nectarines. And in this publication, which you'll see on the screen, we have the different varieties that are recommended for Georgia. It tells you when they're usually harvested, and it tells you how many chill hours they require. Chill hours are one of the more important things on peaches in Georgia. You can think of chill hours as the hours that a peach needs before it's going to start producing flower buds that are going to be viable for the next year. They need a certain number, each variety needs a certain number of hours under, I think it's 45 degrees, before they will actually put on flower buds that will be, viable, make good, peaches for the following year. If you get some of these peach varieties that are, real low chill hour, below 600 hours, some of these things that are down around Florida or South Georgia, you get something like that up here, in normal winter, you're gonna have flowers that start blooming, into January, and then a lot of chances of cold biting them, cold hurting the flowers or the developing fruit. They just flower out way too early. There again, if you get a bunch of these varieties that are high chill hours, in a year like last year or this year, these high chill hour peaches are really stressed to produce enough peaches. The flower buds just don't develop right, and you have a lot of problems there. So variety selection is very important, and spacing out your varieties, picking a few different varieties so you can have a harvest, have a little bit to harvest throughout the summer. All right, for the first 2 years of a peach tree's life, all you really need to be concerned about is growing a tree. You want to grow a tree that's strong, that has scaffold limbs that can support a crop. So you need to concentrate. The first 2 years, all you're doing is growing a tree. You're not worrying about fruit. You're not worried about having a bunch of flowers. You just want a pretty, want a good structurally sound tree. This right here is a first year tree, first leaf tree. This tree was planted this fall, or this winter. And what they do when you first plant a tree, and this is why I say a lot of those trees that you buy in some of these big box stores, it might be a little bit oversized. You want something a little smaller. This tree, if you can see in here where this cut was made, this tree was this big around, about the size of your index finger when it was planted. And you can see how much it's grown in 1 year. But what they did is when this thing was planted, after it was planted, the first thing they did is they came through here and they hacked it off right there, about 18 to 24 inches above the ground. They do that so that in the spring, when it starts to grow, when the buds start to break, these buds below there will actually start pushing out, and that's when you start forming your scaffold limbs. This limb right here will be a good scaffold limb. This will be a good scaffold limb. This one right here is a little bit low, but this is going to end up being another scaffold limb. So anywhere from 3 to 5 scaffold limbs is what you want arranged around that trunk, so that they're coming out and basically making an open face. And that's so for starters, that's what you need to look for. That's what you need to do. All right, now depending on how vigorous your tree's growing, which you can see this is growing pretty vigorously, that's going to kind of determine how much you need to prune the following year. All of this stuff, all of these branches that are coming back into the tree, you might want to you probably want to remove a lot of this. You don't want a lot of really vigorous growing shoots. Those vigorously growing shoots they won't produce as many flower buds on them. So you want a lot of this little, which next year will be fruiting wood and actually have flower buds on it. But another thing you don't want a lot of this growing back into the trunk or growing back in towards the tree. You want to have all this open. So all of this right here, the second year you would start removing this. But you probably want to be a little bit judicious about how much you take it off and how much you leave, because younger trees, like I said, you're trying to grow a tree, you're trying to grow a big root, so you want to have something up top to put something down, put some energy and down into the roots and down into the tree and help that tree grow. Another thing you want to make sure you do is you want to remove any of these suckers down here at the bottom of the tree, which these don't have any suckers, but they can start to grow suckers out from right here, down here at the soil line and down here. But down here on these scaffold limbs, you'll start taking off this limb, probably take one of these as your scaffold and take the other one off. So just to have a good shape, and we'll move from here to some older trees and see what, say, a 3-year-old tree or a 4-year-old tree looks like, and kind of go from there, go on into the a little more in depth into production of fruit. Now that we've kind of got our tree the way we want it, next thing you got to concentrate, you got to change your focus from tree growing to making fruit. So let's head to another orchard. All right, well, we just left a newly planted orchard, 1-year-old tree, or one leaf tree as they call them. This right here, it's hard to believe. This is a 4-year-old tree. So this is the 4th summer this one has put leaves on, been out in the orchard, and you might be able to see a few fruit in here. They've already picked through it probably at least once, probably twice. But you can see how vigorously this is growing. One thing I forgot to mention on the small, when we were talking about the smaller peach trees earlier, is site selection. And I know some of you guys will be limited in the sites, the area that you can choose from in your yard. But if you can choose a site, if you do have some options, it's best to choose a site that's kind of up on a hill, and it's also best to have a south-facing slope versus a north-facing slope. The reason you don't want you want a south-facing slope, it's going to be a little warmer early spring after they've flowered, and the reason you don't want to be at the bottom of a hill is because cold air will settle. Early spring after they flowered or while they're flowering, cold air will settle. This will help you reduce the amount of cold injury you have on the fruit or the small flowers, and give you a good start for fruit production on into the summer. Like I said, this is a 4th year tree, very vigorous tree, and what they'll do this year after they've picked is they'll come in here and they'll remove a lot of this stuff, probably cut back to about right here, and then they'll start cutting back to this fruiting wood. And the fruiting wood, the old wood that you'll want to remove in a peach tree, the older wood that's not going to be good fruiting wood, will kind of have a grayish look to it. The fruiting wood will be good in kind of maroon color. So you want to leave a little bit of fruiting wood. You don't want to leave a terrible lot, but you also want to remove a lot of this. Like I said earlier, same thing on these. You want to remove a lot of this really vigorous, inwardly growing stuff. Take a lot of this off, and that's something you can actually do during the summertime, especially if you're irrigating your peach trees. You can during the summertime, if your trees are growing really vigorously, you can take some limbs off the inside to open it up to allow for some sunlight to penetrate. If you've ever gone out in the orchard and picked peaches or looked at peaches on a tree, you'll always notice that they're always reddest. The best color of that peach is always in the sunniest spot. And sometimes you'll even see where a peach is sitting up and it's got a leaf sitting on it, and if you pull that leaf back, you'll see underneath it where it's light red, kind of orangish, and around it is turned red. That sun will really help color that peach up and make it look pretty and sweeten it up. Anyway, this is a 4th year peach, and we're just going to kind of walk through these peach trees now, because we're going to start talking about the tough things in producing peaches in Georgia. We can grow in the home orchard. We can grow a young tree, get it up to start flowering and start producing. But there's a lot of things we do wrong, a lot of things we don't have time to do, and a lot of things that can go wrong that we're going to talk about for the next few minutes, that make it such a tough thing to grow, it's a tough thing to produce in an orchard, and something that one reason why I don't even try and do it. I let Jeff and Lanes and Pearsons, I'll let them all pull their hair out over it. But we'll start talking about that a little bit for the next few minutes. One thing I didn't mention earlier, and I know a lot of y'all notice this as you go past peach orchards, is having a good weed-free zone around the tree. I tell anybody, if you're growing a fruit tree or if you're growing an ornamental tree, trees and grasses, trees and weeds, they don't mix well. They don't do well together. Any kind of irrigation or water that you're putting out here, you don't want the weeds or the grasses competing. Same thing with fertilizers and things like that. You don't want the grasses and the weeds to take up a lot of the nutrients you're putting out. It also, having a clean ground also helps heat the peaches, heat the ground. Like I said, or again, late spring when they're flowering, or late winter, early spring when they're flowering, it'll help keep those plants a little bit warmer. But keep a good weed-free zone, and you can do this easily in the home orchard with mulches. You can mulch around a tree and keep it weed-free. And then there's also some herbicides you can use, when trees are not bearing or don't have leaves on them. One thing with herbicides you have to be careful about is those suckers that we talked about. If you got suckers and you hit them at the base of a tree, if you use a systemic herbicide, it can go into that tree and injure that tree. But there are a lot of diseases, a lot of insects. I know a lot of you living in this area, y'all see these sprayers going up and down the road, and there's a reason for that. Like I said earlier, peach trees are not native to Georgia. They're native to, I believe, Japan. We have a lot. I tell people this before, and I probably said it on this show. We have, the heat, the humidity, the rainfall. We have everything that you need to be the perfect environment for, fungi, bacteria, insects, you name it. We got it here. We got a long growing season. We got a lot of time for things to grow, populations to grow. So, on peach trees, there's everything from nematodes, which are roundworms. We have 2 of them in this area that can affect peach trees. So, That is why we only recommend that you buy peach trees that are on Nemagard or Guardian rootstock. It's actually a rootstock that is somewhat resistant to nematodes. We also have a few soil-borne diseases that can get on peach trees that there's really nothing you can do about it if you actually have those in your area. That's why a lot of these peach guys try and replant their peaches in an area that has not had peaches. You know, it's hard to find because there's not a lot of farmland around. But if you can find a site that's not had peaches on it, you can do a lot better job, and you can also cut back on the amount, the amount of prep you have to do, fumigation-wise and things like that. Then once you get above ground, we've got lesser peach tree borers, which is an insect pest. We got peach tree borers, which is another one, and probably one of the bigger ones that that we have, basically all throughout the summer sprays is a plum cucurlio, which if you've ever grown a peach and you've got a peach and it looks pretty and everything, and all of a sudden you got this gumming coming out of the peach. Usually that gumming is coming from the larval boring of that plum cucurlio. We got plenty of stink bugs, whether it's a brown stink bug, green stink bug, leaf-footed bugs, and several other type of plant bugs and stink bugs that we have that will pierce peaches. And they don't really, a lot of times they don't often do a lot of damage with their piercing of a larger peach, but what they do is they open it up, they create a wound, they open it up for a further infection from diseases like rhizopus or brown rot. Brown rot's one of our big issues if we don't spray fungicides early on, like at the petal fall, when the petals are falling off the tree, or when the shuck is actually coming off that little tiny peach that's developing. If we don't put fungicides out then, we've got brown rot problems. I'm sure all of y'all have seen the peaches that have the little black specks on it. That's peach scabs, another fungal disease that we can get on peaches. And then we also have in this area, if you grow susceptible varieties, we can have bacterial spot or bacteriosis, which will affect the leaves and can also affect the fruit. So you can see we've got a lot of diseases, a lot of insects that can cause problems. And another insect we have is scale insects that can cause problems that require oil sprays throughout the winter. So that's the insect pressure and disease pressure is probably the biggest thing, the biggest limiting factor we have in Georgia to try and produce a home garden peach. When you look at honestly, to produce a peach, the quality and just the look of what you get in a peach package shed, you're looking at probably every 7 days going out there with some sort of sprayer and trying to spray that tree to protect it, whether it's from disease or insects. And they all have different cycles and different timings. So I mean, it's a full-time job, and that's why I always tell people when they ask me about growing peach trees, I tell them just to leave the peach tree at the store, plant your vegetable garden, and then hop in the truck and ride down the road. And that's what we're going to do from here. We're going to look for a few insect pests and maybe some diseases that I can show you, and then we're going to head from here, go to Taylor Orchards, maybe see if we can catch Jeff and have him tell a little bit about his thoughts on growing peaches and the art of being a peach farmer. All right here, what you probably have is that big hole is probably some bird damage. Birds do a lot of damage to these things, and after the bird damaged it, this real black area looks like rhizopus, which is a really weak pathogen, but once it gets an opening, it can definitely cause some problems and it'll get black, and all of a sudden the whole piece will just turn black and it'll fall apart. What I was looking for is we found some sap beetles, which is something we often see in a home orchard on overripe peaches. There's some sap beetles right here. These little guys right here, those are sap beetles. They're not really a pest unless you let your peaches get too ripe, and then they can start getting into the fruit. But you can see how small those little beetles are. And they'll get down in those little holes, whether it's made by a bird or whatever. There's another sap beetle, different kind. They'll get down in there and they'll start eating and feeding, and they'll start their little larvae. They'll lay eggs and they'll eat and feed, and it'll just turn to mush. So if you ever pick an overripe peach and you got a hole in it, make sure you check inside. All right, we were talking about gumming that can be caused on the fruit sometimes when plum cucurlio hit them. That's probably what this is right here. That gumming on the outside, and probably underneath you find this little hole. I don't know if you can see that little hole. The plum cucurlio, which is a snout beetle, it actually lays an egg right there. The larvae will bore into it and start feeding, and it feeds in there inwards towards the pit. All right, here's one of the pests I talked about. This is a brown stink bug. We also have green stink bugs, and we have leaf-footed bugs. I don't think we'll get a picture of a leaf-footed bug unless we get one up on a tree, because they're really skittish. When you get close to them, they'll fly pretty readily. Other stink bugs usually just fall off when you try and grab them. There are predaceous stink bugs too, and if you grab them by their shoulders and turn them over and look at their mouth part, if it's real fat, you can tell it's predaceous. Most of the ones you find out here, they're gonna be plant feeders, real thin, and what they do is they just probe this, sucking juices out of the fruit, and can cause some discoloration and actually help with, different diseases getting into the fruit. If you see something weird looking like this, if I can keep them in one place, this is an immature stink bug. So, that stink bug that I just showed a minute ago is probably, they're laying eggs up in here, and the immatures are growing out on these peaches, and they too can cause damage. So that's just what that weird looking little critter is before it actually has wings and can fly. All right, I just wanted to show you this tree just to make a point. Like I said earlier, most peach trees are grafted onto rootstock. That rootstock a lot of times might be a plum, it might be something different, but it's not going to be usually the same. It's never going to be the same thing as what you buy, the variety that you buy. So what has happened here is the top of this tree has died. It died because of scale insects, and it's hard to see, but all of these are coming back from below where that graft was made on that tree. So even if these do produce a fruit down the road, it's not going to be one that you're probably going to want to eat. It's going to be something it's going to be a small little gnarly peach. Probably never make a really good peach. And you can see on this one some orange, some purple spotting, which could be, this variety right here is very susceptible to bacterial spot. With the year we've had, this could definitely be some bacterial spot. But just wanted to show you that, just so you know, if you have a peach tree that dies back, what comes back from the ground is not going to be what you paid for, so you may as well just start over. All right, like I said, the variety right here is highly susceptible to bacterial spot. It's actually a variety that's bred for California, where they don't have bacterial spot. They don't have a lot of diseases out there because they don't really have the humidity and the moisture that we have. But these little shot holes in this leaf are probably bacterial spot on this leaf. And the things we use to control bacterial spots are coppers, and coppers can actually cause the same thing on the leaves. So, but right now with fruit producing, we're trying to protect the fruit. We can handle losing a little bit of leaf area, but coppers and then streptomycin is what we use for bacterial spot at this time of year. But you basically have to, a wet year like we're having now, and varieties that are susceptible, you have to use something like that. All right, so we're up here at Taylor Orchards, and if you do everything that I said throughout this whole episode correctly, the Lord blesses you with plenty of rain and good weather, then maybe you too can end up with this. But most likely, like most home growers, homeowners, peach orchards, if you end up with something like this, you're doing a really good job. So that's why I always tell people, you don't want to be growing your own peaches, especially if you live in middle Georgia. Most of you folks that can see this TV show, you're within 25 miles of a large peach grower that has stuff like this all summer long, and they would be happy to sell it to you. So, take that advice from me. Remember, I'm Jeff Cook. This is Backyard Basics, where we're filmed live in your backyard. And the number one reason why you shouldn't grow your own peaches and visit one of your local peach producers is they all have ice cream. And that's where me and Elijah are going right now. We're gonna go get some ice cream. So come back next month. Thank you.